everybody, and welcome to CityLAB Hamilton's Matchmaker session. My name is Juliana Weber, and I'm the coordinator for CityLAB at the City of Hamilton. These events are where we meet with city staff who've presented a challenge to CityLAB and connect them with courses and faculty members in higher education in the city, and find if we have a good match for students to tackle the project. Today we are joined by Anya Ledbetter, the manager of elections and print and mail at the City of Hamilton, and Conor Flood, the elections coordinator for the city. And they will be telling us today about enhancing accessibility and addressing barriers to voting. This is also very topical for Hamilton because we have an election coming up in 2022. So I will welcome Anya and Conor, and if you could tell us about your role at the city and what you do, that would be good. If we could start with Anya, if you can tell us what you do and how it impacts the City of Hamilton.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Anya Leadbetter. I am the manager of elections, print and mail for the City of Hamilton. And my role at the city is to oversee and to administer the 2022 municipal election, ensuring that we are aligned with the Municipal Elections Act and that we successfully implement an election that is fair, transparent, free, that we have confidence with regard to the vote, and that the election is accessible for all voters.
Wonderful. And how about you, Conor?
Hi, everyone. My name is Conor Flood. So I am one of two elections coordinators supporting the rollout of the 2022 municipal election. So my particular focus is going to be more on the outreach and engagement side and really casting that wide net to ensure that people understand there's a municipal election, people understand why a municipal election is important, and we really have, strong access, thinking very broadly about the term access to the election, and making sure that people feel confident and comfortable as they, begin to figure out who they might want to vote for and how they would actually go about that process. So I am a city staff from another section. This is a temporary role for me. So I do have, some history in the City of Hamilton. This is the city that I was born and raised in. So I care passionately about our city and how our elections work, and that we elect good people to represent us and deliver, strong, responsive municipal services. So I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us.
Fantastic. Could you guys give us a background onto the challenge, what you presented, a little bit of the background and context of what the idea is behind the challenge and what you're looking to do with students?
Sure. Yeah, I can take this one on. So coming into this role, I would say, we really started with a sense that, we know that municipal election voter turnout is traditionally very low. So this is the case in Hamilton. It's really the case across the province, certainly across the country. People don't tend to vote in municipal elections in great numbers. So, part of where we really started was, looking at that voter turnout rate, starting to think about, what we could do, and also recognizing that, voter turnout rate does vary in the city depending on the ward. So we do know there are certain segments of the area or of the city where people are not voting in larger numbers. So that's really where it started. To add to that as well, as the city clerk and myself are responsible for elections under the Municipal Act, one of the key tenets of this is ensuring that voters have access to vote. And our interest is really to ensure that people who want to vote are able to vote, that we cast a very wide net and a large definition or broad definition on accessibility. And to this, in order to be able to, confidently let people vote or give them the tools to vote, what we really want to do is to look at barriers that exist that impede people's ability to vote. So kind of tying it all together in a way, the low voter turnout, we know that, this is heightened in certain areas. We know from other municipalities who have done some analysis on voter turnout and trends that, in other areas, there does tend to be a connection between lower voter turnout and some demographic characteristics such as immigration status, visible minority status, age, income, home ownership. Really what we wanted to understand was in the city of Hamilton, who has access to vote, who has not traditionally has had access to vote, what barriers exist, and what can we do as a municipality to identify and remove some of these barriers so that we can really meet that requirement under the Municipal Elections Act to ensure that voters have access to the vote. So that's really, where we're coming from. We really want to understand the community and do what we can to enhance, access and ultimately, hopefully to increase engagement.
That's really interesting. And I'm curious, how does the turnout in Hamilton? You're saying that it's relatively low, and especially for a municipal election, those don't generally see the higher turnout. How does it compare across other municipalities across Canada? Is it similar, or does Hamilton have a particular voting issue?
Um, all municipalities tend to have low voter turnout when it comes to municipal elections. It really sort of depends on the election. So, what I would say generally, what I've found and in talking to other municipalities is that voter turnout rates are, they tend to be tied to, certain issues. So if there's a real hot topic issue, that election, you'll get more people coming out. If there's a very strong mayor's race, you'll end up getting more people coming out. But generally it is pretty low. So Hamilton has fared better in some years. And in other years, not so much. So just to give you a sense of where we're at. So last municipal election, which was 2018, our voter turnout rate was 38.4%, which was actually the highest turnout rate in Hamilton since 2000. So 2000, of course, was the amalgamation year. So there was a big issue on the agenda. And even at that point, it was only 42% of eligible voters turned out to vote. So 38% last time that there was an election, and that election had, a hot topic. So the LRT, there was also a strong mayor's race. So that did account for some of the voter turnout. But generally, since amalgamation, 42% has been the highest that we've had. It has generally tended to be in the 30% range. I think our lowest, and don't quote me on this, but I think the lowest was 32%. In terms of other municipalities, I would say that is about comparable. I'd have to pull the figures specifically, but municipal elections are traditionally, they don't have high turnout.
That is true. That is a consistent trend.
The other thing, Juliana, I would just add to that, sorry, just to just to build. I would also say, within Hamilton, so we have a 38% voter turnout. This then differs across the city. So there are certain wards where we do tend to see higher voter turnout that drive some of that. The overall voter turnout rate. So for example, on the mountain in our suburban communities, people vote in higher numbers than what we see in the city. So there is, variance across the city. Last election, we did see some higher turnout rates within the city, particularly in areas where there was some, interesting campaigns going on. But there is definitely a distinction, and this is a distinction that does seem to exist across elections as well.
A question about the ward differences, and understanding that it has to be, your mandate is having like a fair election. Are you able to do specific campaigns or targeting to help increase accessibility and awareness in certain wards, or does it need to be consistent across the city?
No, I would say that we could do targeted approaches. We do need to ensure that it's fair.
Yeah.
But if there are communities that would benefit from greater communication, then certainly we can do that. And one of the things that we have been looking at, for example, is tenants, renters. Because this is a group that traditionally, they don't end up on the voters list. So we do have a voters list that's provided to us from MPAC, and it's based on property. So homeowners show up on the list. Renters do show up on the list when they add themselves, but we know people do tend to move, in a lot of cases. So it sometimes is not necessarily the most accurate list with regard to the voters. So we are looking at a targeted approach for tenants, for example, just to communicate around the voters list and to make sure that people are aware of how to get on that voters list. So I think we can certainly have different approaches. We want to ensure that it's equitable in the end, but that might look a little different depending on the group that we're looking at.
Fair enough. And I'm wondering what methods do other municipalities have for tracking the various demographics? For looking to see what those trends are. How do you go around tracking or assessing those demographics?
With regard to voting specifically?
Yeah. Do we have an idea of how to track those trends?
So it is a little bit difficult, of course, because voting is it's confidential. So we don't collect information at the poll with regard to demographics, and we wouldn't. So what some municipalities have done is following the election, they've released a survey. So there was one at the City of Toronto following one of the elections, either 2018 or 2014, where they did ask the community some demographic information in addition to some questions about the vote. But frankly, it's really not something that's been done extensively across municipalities. This is an area that I would say people are becoming more interested in, but it's really not something that has been done extensively. Where it has been done, it's generally in the larger communities, and I would say some of the work that these municipalities have been doing is sort of looking at the voter trends or the voter turnout, and then comparing that with ward profiles to make inferences. So surveys, comparison of data is really how it has occurred, but it really hasn't been an area that's been extensively researched in municipalities.
I wanted to ask you guys about our Future Hamilton. That was a very, I think, a very valuable summit that they put together a few years ago and engaged with residents across our city. And a big portion of our Future Hamilton was identifying some of the barriers to voting, quite specifically. And one of the big ones was political efficacy and feelings of not making a difference whether people voted or not. Are you going to be incorporating some of our Future Hamilton data into your approach to this election? And how do you see some of what they did at our Future Hamilton kind of influencing the work that you guys are doing this year?
So I can take that one. You're definitely correct. Our Future Hamilton created a great toolkit of sorts for staff as they move forward with public engagement exercises and being able to refer back to what the priorities of the community are and what they would hope to get out of public engagement. So as we move forward with our plans and working with CityLAB and hearing the feedback from students and the groups that they consult, we'll also be looking at our public engagement workbooks and making sure that we align with the best practices that have been established alongside the community. In terms of our Future Hamilton, one of the priorities is the community participation and engagement vision statement. And so looking at openness and access to information and ensuring that residents are informed and aware of the municipal election, and as I mentioned previous, why it matters and what they are actually voting for. There are certain things that naturally with an election we can't change. They fall under, you know, legislative responsibilities, or, you know, we can't change the shape of a ballot, you know, for just to kind of make a simple example. But there's definitely stuff that we can change or augment in terms of, you know, what information is out there, what information pieces are available, how familiar are people with the election process. And that's kind of where our consultations will begin, is kind of building that end-to-end access strategy at every major touch point in an election, and ensuring that people, you know, voters, they understand what they're getting into, you know, to kind of, you know, put it in simplest terms. And, you know, ideally being able to turn that into, you know, increased participation, seeing, you know, changes in the voting rate, seeing people adding themselves to the voter list, looking at those very specific metrics, and then being able to take that to the community and saying, you know, look what you guys did in the last election. We saw, you know, greater turnout, and building that momentum moving forward.
I think that's a really good segue into asking, you know, the next part of this is what are the goals or specific deliverables that you are hoping a student group can take on? What do you guys have envisioned for a student group?
Yeah, so I think, you know, there's a couple things. I think, you know, we're pretty broad right now because we really want to get out there. We want to understand the barriers. So critically, you know, that assistance in terms of outreach and understanding the barriers that exist to voting. You know, we want to consult and we want to engage the community, absolutely. So that is a big, you know, a task for us. You know, we want to be able to have tangible, you know, suggestions, things that the city can do within, you know, the scope of our power, as Connor indicated, you know, to make this more accessible, to make this a process where, you know, people can more easily engage. You know, I would love to have different lenses applied to the process. So, you know, that's something that we've been going out to access or advise council advisory committees, you know, to ask them. You know, we specifically brought the question of poll locations, and, you know, here's our criteria. What are we missing? What are the lenses that are not being applied? Where are our gaps? And you know, that's kind of, you know, part of it for me and Connor, I think, you know, is that, you know, we see things from our perspective, but, you know, what are we missing? So I think, you know, that's another area that we'd love students, you know, to sort of help assist with. So yeah, so I think, you know, to sort of summarize that, it's, you know, it's help with the barriers, you know, the outreach, the lenses, you know, things that we're missing, and some real tactical suggestions and ideas that we can implement to ensure that this is a more accessible process.
I would just, you know, add to that, from our worldview, we're looking at things from a city staff perspective. And we're two city staff members who are obsessed with politics. And like, so an election is like super fun. And for a lot of people, they don't have the same interest. So looking at it as a way of, you know, how do we heighten excitement around it? How do we make something that, yes, us political nerds are like, of course we're going to vote, but how do we really like build that out into a much bigger program that is responsive, that is inclusive, that really, you know, meets people where they are, that comes from that kind of bottom up, you know, approach, and really kind of build this groundswell movement in the community. So, you know, no, at this point, no idea is a bad idea. We'll definitely scope it out, but we really are casting a wide net, as Anya mentioned.
Yeah, thank you for jumping in there, because I totally forgot about that. And you raise a good point. And you know, that's the other side of this, is the, you know, how do we get people excited and wanting to come out, and you know, how do we enhance the education so people know why they should come out and what they're voting for, and all of that. So I mean, I think there might be a marketing project in there for sure, but you know, that helping to instill the desire in the community to come out and vote would be fabulous.
Do either of you have any last words? I think we can wrap this up.
It's going to be fun.
It will be.
We're going to have fun.
Connor and I are big election nerds. We're in the right job. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity here for students. I think, you know, it is a very big topic generally, you know, and I think there is a real strong opportunity for students to become engaged in the process, you know, to work with the community, to have a real impact on, you know, a process that we're going to be implementing in the next year. So to me, that's really exciting. You know, in terms of our staff, we've got a really great small election staff who's really engaged and excited, you know, and really interested in working with students. So I think, you know, to echo Connor, it's going to be great. It's going to be fun. You know, and again, I think it's a real worthwhile and valuable exercise. So super excited.